This is an RNZ podcast.
Hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Music 101 interview podcast. I'm Charlotte Ryan, and earlier this week I had the absolute honour and privilege to interview Jim Reid from the Scottish band the Jesus and Mary Chain. Can you believe it that the Jesus and Mary Chain, they sing that iconic song Just Like Honey, they are celebrating 40 years, and they're also returning to New Zealand to perform in just a couple of weeks. From the moment the brothers Jim and William Reid first started recording together early in the 1980s in Glasgow, they created a sound like no other. The Jesus and Mary Chain's music is intense, is sometimes so brutal. It's dark, it's romantic. They really sort of defied musical boundaries, and by doing this, it made them one of the most influential acts of the modern era. The Jesus and Mary Chain have just released a brand new album. It's called Glasgow Eyes, and many are saying it's as good as Psycho Candy, their very first album. And I mean, it's hard to make that call, but I'm very much enjoying it. So when I had the opportunity to speak to Jim Reid, I couldn't wait to talk about the band's anniversary ahead of their New Zealand shows. I also wanted to ask about their autobiography, which is on its way. It's called Never Understood, the story of Jesus and Mary Chain. And when I logged in, late night New Zealand time, Jim Reid was sitting in his lounge with his laptop in front of him. I could see him. He had a guitar on the wall and this cool piece of art behind him. So we started talking about that.
I am. I'm in my living room at the moment with my guitar and my pictures on the wall.
Do you take that guitar out on the road?
I don't. That's an old acoustic guitar. That's about 90 years old, that guitar. Older than I am. And I just sit in my living room and I give it a little tickle every now and again. This is more of a songwriting guitar, really, to be honest with you.
Do you just write in your lounge? Like, do you sort of just get caught in a whim sometimes?
Just anywhere and wherever the mood hits you. But this tends to be the spot, this little corner here with that guitar on the wall there. So this is where I like to be.
Is it quite crazy for you to think that you're going to be on the other side of the world in a couple of weeks?
Well, it kind of is, but, I've done it before and I've done it many times. So it's exciting, because, quite long in the tooth now. So you kind of think, how long can I keep doing this? But as long as it feels good, we will keep doing it. And so just looking forward to it, really.
Do you like travelling? Like when you get to different cities, I imagine it's different to what it used to be back in the day. But, do you like going out for dinner and walking around the city?
I do very much. I mean, the thing that I like to do most when I get to a city is to just check into the hotel and then just go for a big, long, rambling walk around a city that I don't know very well. And I quite enjoy getting lost and finding my way back to the hotel. That's the best bit about touring, actually. The trouble is it's pretty hectic, so a lot of it is just jumping off the bus to a sound check and then play the show and then back on the bus and then you sleep on the bus. So it can be kind of grueling, but when you get those few days where there's not a lot to do, just play the show and maybe spend some time in a place, that's the best of it.
That's cool. That's nice to know. Because would you ever get recognised on the street?
I do tend to more when I'm on tour than I do. Like walking around here, nobody knows who I am. I live in a little town in Devon on the coast. And I'm just some guy that lives in a house down the road a bit, and nobody bothers me, and that's just exactly as I would have it. When you're on tour, people tend to know the Mary Chain are in town, so some weird old dude is stumbling around looking lost. They think, it must be one of those senile old rocker types.
No, you've suggested that you're quite old, but you're still in your 60s. I don't think that's old.
Well, it's not old, but we're getting there. We're not quite the Rolling Stones, but we're getting there.
Do you have a limit? Do you have an age limit where you wouldn't tour anymore?
No, I don't think you should either. I think it's all about how it feels. I mean, got back together. We split up for 9 years and we got back together in, I think it was 2007. And one of the questions we were asking ourselves was, is it right to do this? I mean, isn't the Mary Chain a kind of a young person's thing? And then in the end, we just thought, well, let's go into a rehearsal space and just see how it feels. And it felt great playing the songs again. And then that was only one part of it. Then it was climbing on a stage. And does it feel right? Is it undignified, I suppose? And we did it, and we felt that it wasn't. And we felt that as long as we felt good about the music, which will be forever, and as long as people are standing out in front of us, apparently entertained by whatever we do, then there's a point to it. I mean, if it starts to feel a bit like you're going through the motions, then that's the time to give it a rest, I think. I mean, I think we've made one of the best albums we've ever made now in our 60s. So
I agree. I was just about to say, I don't think you've got any concern at needing to stop anytime soon, because I think, and I've read other reviews, but Glasgow Eyes is just such a strong album. It's so brilliant. Glasgow is the town that you guys grew up in, and you left in the mid-80s, but you also recorded this album there. Is it like a nostalgic album for you then? Is the title nostalgic?
The album was written before we headed to Glasgow to record it, so it's not really about Glasgow. We used the title because we were there and we thought, wow, weird that we're back here, back where it all began almost 40 later. And we thought, well, why don't we make the title of the album some sort of Glasgow reference? And at that point, we didn't know what that was going to be. And then William, we were in the studio. He's been tinkering around with some digital art that he likes to do. And so he said he was going to do the cover, and that sounded good to me. So he brought some ideas down to the studio, and it was all, pictures of, a face with like messed up eyes, scored out or whatever. And I said something like, oh, that looks like Glasgow Eyes. I have no idea what I meant. I have no idea why I said it. But as soon as I said that, we looked at each other and thought, that's the title. That's the album title. And it was. We stuck with it.
Oh, how funny. I wondered whether it was like a term, she's got real Glasgow eyes, or he's got the Glasgow eyes.
It was just suggested by the images that he came up with as cover art. And that was it. But I mean, being back in Glasgow, making the record, there was a lot of nostalgia in just being there, walking. I would get up every morning and go for these long rambling walks that I'm talking about. And I just walk all over Glasgow for about 2 or 3 hours before we hit the studio. And it kind of just set me up in the right frame of mind to make music, really. It's great to be there.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it positive emotions that you're feeling? Because, there would have been sort of weird memories, like distant memories of buildings and...
Oh, yeah. I mean, every street you walk down, you think, oh, God, I remember like something, remember getting into a fight down that little alley down there or whatever, It's full of memories. We were both born in Glasgow, and then we moved to East Kilbride, which is a suburb of Glasgow, a new town just south of Glasgow. But we spent a lot of time in Glasgow even when we lived in East Kilbride.
And did you and William, used to sort of jam as teenagers? Were you music lovers? Is that how it all started? Two brothers in a bedroom, in a sense?
It wasn't. I mean, we were music lovers, but we were not natural musicians. I mean, we'd kind of entertained the idea of being in a band, but when you're really young, it just seems like an impossible thing to achieve. Really, you live in this little outpost, East Kilbride. It might as well have been Mars or something like that. It just felt like so removed from where everything was going on. We had the idea of being in a band, but it was more of a fantasy, really, until punk rock happened. And it was like punk rock was a bunch of snot-nosed kids that looked and sounded like us. So that is kind of when the idea of a band became a possible reality. And even then, it took us like several years to actually get it together. But we got there in the end.
Did it surprise you then when you got the success that you did?
I don't know. It did and it didn't. We felt, I mean, we were a bit kind of like full of ourselves, I suppose. We kind of expected it, but at the same time, when it actually happened, we were like, geez, like we're kind of famous. That's weird.
And what was it, do you think, that got you guys back together? I heard that it was your mother, after you had that terrible breakup and took some time off. Was it your mother that got the band back together in a sense?
Well, it was my mum and it was Linda. My sister Linda has just walked into the room.
Oh.
And Linda and my mother were kind of instrumental in getting us back together. Linda was kind of always the one in between me and William. So the United Nations of the Jesus and Mary chain. But whenever we had big blazing rows, we would each get on the phone to Linda separately and say, "Oh, guess what he said to me?" It'd be like that. And then so Linda was kind of trying to get us back together. And then we were doing the Sister Vanilla album, which was my sister's album. And we both started to work with Linda, but separately on that album. And I think that was the beginning of the repairing process. So
that's so great that your sister was involved. Please pass on thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any rules now in the band? I mean, obviously there's not as much, from what I understand, there's not as much alcohol or drugs involved. But do you have rules now as siblings, as brothers, even as, friends in a band?
I mean, it's a weird way to put it, rules. I mean, I suppose there are just things that we consider to be unacceptable and that there are things that we just wouldn't do, so if that's rules, yeah, there are rules. I mean, as far as like dealing with each other, because of like horrendous arguments that we had in the 1990s that led to the band's breakup, we know kind of like what not to say and what not to do. We get close. I mean, we do get close to that same intensity. I mean, we were in Italy a couple of weeks ago and we had a massive screaming row with each other. But because of the way it was in the 90s, we knew that if it goes beyond this, you're going to say things that can't be unsaid. So you get to that point and you sort of step back and just lick your wounds a bit. And then usually there's, these days, there are apologies that come after the horrendous arguments, and the apology part would never have happened in the 1990s.
Yeah, true. Well, I was actually wondering whether chaos, do you think, chaos was a necessary part of Jesus and Mary Chain, but I think maybe it's not because Glasgow Eyes is such a brilliant album.
There kind of is, even now there's a kind of chaos about the band. I mean, it's not as obvious as it was in the 80s and 90s. Chaos was everywhere. It's like it was in the music, it was in the organisation, it was in the shows, it was in everything. It was just like there was a kind of almost organised chaos, if you like. Whereas nowadays, there's we seem to be kind of resistant to making firm plans. So people always say, what are you going to be doing next year? Well, I don't know. Let next year take care of itself. And there's a kind of a chaos in that. So, but that's as chaotic as it gets now.
I look forward to seeing you in New Zealand soon.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You've also got an autobiography coming, I believe, too. Any ideas when that's being released?
It keeps getting shoved back. It's finished. It's not quite an autobiography. Me and William did very, very long and extensive interviews with a guy called Ben Thompson. And we did separately. He did his with Ben and I did mine. And so it's just our memories of what it was like in our childhood leading up to the band. And then it more or less goes up to 1997 breakup. There's a little bit about afterwards, but it's more or less up to that point. And, we each discuss things that, the key moments of the band, and it gives different perspectives. I mean, the breakup he describes completely differently from how I describe it. So, and there's a few sad moments, there's a few funny moments. I think if you're interested in a band, it should be a decent read. I think now they're talking about, at Christmas or something like that.
Of course, great Christmas present for your fans. As you're explaining that, I feel this sort of tenseness in your voice. Are you sort of like, why would someone want to read a book about us, or where's your energy coming from?
I don't know. I mean, there have been books before, but this one was like with pretty much, we were the driving forces. It was Ben's idea, and we were resistant at the very beginning. But once we sort of decided we were going to do it, we put everything into it, and we kind of told the story the way it really was. There's no point in doing a book unless you're going to tell everybody the true story. And now we might have told everybody everything, but anything that's in that book happened. It's warts and all. I mean, some would say it's just warts. So I don't know. I mean, like people, it kind of blows the myth a little bit. I think a lot of people do these kind of books and they do a kind of manicured version of what their story's about. This is just us. This is us telling you remember it.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much again for your time, and thanks for coming to New Zealand in just a couple of weeks. What can we expect at your show?
Mary Chain music. I mean, we don't try that hard these days. And in the beginning, there was a kind of at the very beginning of the band, a lot of drunk guys weren't really that sure that we could do this. And then, somewhere in the middle, it was like a case of trying too hard to be things that we couldn't be. I can never be Iggy Pop or Mick Jagger, and I got, so drunk and out of my head on drugs trying to be. These days, it's Jim and William Reid being themselves. If you like the music, you'll like the show. I'm pretty sure of that.
Jim Reid, thank you so much. That wraps up another Music 101 interview podcast. I was speaking with Jim Reid from the Jesus and Mary Chain. Their brand new album is out now, Glasgow Eyes. Go and listen to it. Also, apparently it's Christmas that we can expect the autobiography to come out. It's called Never Understood, the story of the Jesus and Mary Chain. But go listen to Psycho Candy too if you get a chance. They tour and play the Power Station in just a couple of weeks here in Auckland. They will be so good live. But as usual, make sure you follow this podcast if you don't already. If you love music and love discovering what musicians think, make sure you like this podcast, follow it and send it and share it with your friends too. Until next time, have a great week.